back in the smaller, more intimate room while more fun things are happening in the main chamber. Being 7:30, we will kick off. As usual, first item on the agenda, it is minutes from last meeting. Now, I'm just going to make it slightly more interesting. People should have had a look at the minutes, and you'll see that we've now taken advantage of digital recording, and that the published minutes of the meeting effectively refer to the recording, which obviously is a lot more efficient for things. But what that does do is it highlights any actions or objections, etc., that would be taken during the meeting. So last time that there are a number of action points. So I just want to highlight to people that this is sort of the way that we're taking steps. So it's going to be important that if anybody feels that during a meeting in discussion there was an action taken away, or there was something that needs to be brought forward to the front sheet, it will be up to you to ensure that that is in the published notes that come on the next meeting. So for all of that said, does anybody have any comments or concerns on the minutes of our last meeting, which only being a month ago is probably still fresh in everybody's memories? No? Okay. So we will take that as all agreed, and I will sign those at the end of this meeting. Item 2 is apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Gale, who is substituted by Councillor Stevens. Do we have any other apologies?
Councillor Williams and Councillor Duris is substituted.
Okay. Williams. Welcome, Councillor Duris. Declarations of interest. Do we have any for any of the items going forward? No? Okay. Public participation, there is none. Consideration of any matter referred to the committee in relation to Calden, there is none. And then we move on to the action points from the previous meeting, which kindly were circulated separately on an update. I'm not sure if everybody has spotted those, and I think the only one that's outgoing, that is ongoing, had Councillor Williams's names against that. And looking at that, the other one was Councillor Gale. So those councillors are not here to confirm that those are closed off. So unfortunately, they will roll forward. But we can confirm those outside the meeting. That brings us on to...
Sorry, Chair. With regard to Councillor Williams' request, if I recall, I was also party to that request, and looking at it, the way I read it is that it's up for further action, so I don't think it is appropriate to regard it as being closed off. The initial element might be closed off, but the substantive element isn't closed off.
Okay, just a point, we are talking about the KPI target query. Okay, now to be clear, I'm not considering that any of these are closed off. I'm considering that that we can't mark them as closed off without the councillors here. But by all means, if you want to follow up with Aidan directly on that to check it at how progress is happening with it, feel free.
Well, I'm sure Councillor Williams will want to, but I'm sure that we'll hunt in a pack.
Looking forward to it, Councillor. Okay. Any other questions on action points before moving on? No? Okay, which then brings us on to our first agenda item, which is the Financial Performance Quarter 3 report. and Nigel's hiding in the corner over there.
Well, I thought I was hiding in plain sight.
Call on you there.
Visible from all areas of the room. I'll give you a brief summary, but obviously I'll take the report as read. This highlights our projected financial performance for 23-24 as of the end of Q3, the end of December. In terms of the general fund, we are still reporting a surplus, so effectively a positive position in terms of the budget of just under £250,000 as of Q3. We don't expect a significant movement between that and year end, apart from any technical adjustments that may happen at the end of the year. But that, again, they don't really count in terms of a pressure or a surplus. On the HRA, there's an alternative position and they've got a pressure of £630,000. As this committee will be aware, we've been fighting with the HRA all year long in terms of demand pressures and the cost pressures that they're suffering, particularly from repairs and maintenance. The report goes into a lot of that in detail. And we're still not having an ongoing battle there in terms of managing demand and managing some of the cost pressures there. That pressure is concerning. What's more concerning is how that will flow into 24-25 and the budget that we've set. We have allowed a huge amount of growth in the 24-25 budget, several £1 million for demand and cost pressures. The question now is whether that was enough, and we'll find that out over the next kind of 6 or 9 months. And reports will come back to the committee on a regular basis, I believe, in terms of the HRA financial performance. In regards to overall capital programme, no significant overspends or underspends in terms of the capital programme. But as we've mentioned before, there's been several rephased or slippage that's happened this year, moving on to 24-25. We do expect this year, I've said this before to this committee, to be the last year of significant slippage in these capital programmes, because the major issues for those, which were procurement following COVID, the significant cost pressures of the new contracts and the moratorium on planning have all now ceased. So we think we're in a good place to deliver on the capital programme we've outlined for 24-26. So from that perspective, hopefully we see less slippage going forward. Nothing to bring to the attention of the committee other than that, other than the report, and open up to any questions or queries that the committee may have.
Okay, Councillor Pound.
You've got £250,000 for the flats in Westgate Shops.
Yep.
Is this still the case? And could you clarify, please?
There has been no changes to the budgets on Rossgate Flats. There has been changes to when the money is going to get spent, because I understand the works are happening right at the end of this financial year, the beginning of the next, is my recollection, because they're following on from the other neighbourhood, whose name I've forgotten.
The mighty Republic of Bennett's End.
Bennett's End. They're moving from Bennett's End, the same contractors, onto Rossgate, is my understanding, hence why there's been a little bit of a delay. The idea was to do them both simultaneously, but that wasn't possible with the contractors, so there's one following the other. So the spend will be more in 24-25 than 23-24. Thank you, Councillor Helm, officer.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Santa Maria.
This may be something that you have to go away and find out about. On point 9.4, we've obviously put in quite a few electric vehicle charging points recently. Have they been assessed at any point for accessibility? Wheelchair users in other areas have reported not being able to get to the charging points and not being able to lift the charging nozzle and not being able to see the screens because they're above head height when you're sitting in a wheelchair. I wondered if any of that had been addressed.
Your opening comment were entirely correct. I think it's something we'd have to come back to you on unless Ben's got a specific answer.
No, there's no specific answer. As far as I'm aware, it hasn't been that hasn't been taken under consideration. We rightly or wrongly had assumed that the service providers would ensure that any installations that are put forward would be open for all members of the public and residents. But absolutely happy to take that away and raise that with the service providers.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome. Thank you. Councillor Hannell.
Yeah, I've got two questions. The first one is extremely encouraged by table 1, which is sitting between 3.2 and 3.3 on page 9 of 72. I just wonder if I can ask the officer how confident is he that he's going to be able to either land or end up with a surplus at the end of Q4?
The general fund will end with a surplus at the end of Q4. Much easier for me to say with only 25 more days to go in the financial year.
Do you know how much we're looking at?
In terms of before technical accounting, I would expect it to be very much in line with the Q3 performance. So we have done a period 10 review internally at the moment, and that's coming out with the same numbers. It's a couple of slight movements, but pretty much the same one. So I wouldn't expect significant movements between now and year end, apart from technical adjustments which might come about through depreciation recalculations, bad debt provision, but the type of things that happen every year and are kind of playing with numbers in the background.
And Chair, supplementary to that, will we be able to get a heads up for the next meeting on what the year-end figure is, or do we have to wait till the next committee?
There will be a provisional outturn produced in mid-May to early June, which will come back to this committee, and that'll be the first point where you'll get the outturn position. But that is what our accounts will be based on as well, so you'll get a very firm position at that point in time.
Thank you. This is my first Q3, so thanks for being patient with me. Can I take you to page 13, which is table 5? It's really in response to the reason why responsive repairs are costing more than we forecast. You did mention that, but I just wonder if there's a rationale.
So we've alluded to it slightly more details from the housing reports we did around Q2, but the two issues are perfect storm from an economic perspective. Demand is far higher than we expected, and it hasn't dropped off. We expected demand throughout 23-24 to start to reduce because we saw a big spike happening in 22-23, which was recovering a lot of the work we haven't been able to do in the COVID era. So we expected that to slightly decline. We're still not seeing that decline. So demand has been far higher than we predicted at the beginning of the year and far higher than we were predicting in Q1, Q2 even. Supplementary to that, we've had to agree significant increases in the cost of those works with our providers because construction inflation has just been ridiculously high. So for instance, there are some small pieces of work, I think bathrooms and kitchens, in fact 20% higher than what we were originally projecting. So we've carried on doing the work because we committed to do those pieces of work, but we got to the point where there's significant costs. And this table 5 was part of the work we used for the 24-25 budget, just to give the committee a little bit of comfort that we put a lot of growth in for 24-25, that kind of £5 million, because that's what we were seeing. But we also did it, again, assuming 24-25 that we'll see demand drop at some point. We're getting nervous at the moment because we can't control demand. If there are responsive repairs we have to do, we do them. We're just hoping that we've done a significant amount now that should start to reduce over time.
Comprehensive answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 questions. The first one's a point of clarification. On page 8 of the reports pack, paragraph 1.2, in Q2, the HRA is reporting a budget pressure of 0.62 million. This represents an increase in reporting pressures of 0.25 million from the position reported at Q3. And should that be Q3 or Q2?
It should be Q2, apologies.
Thank you, that's a clarification. And the second one is that looking at trends, that the surplus on the general fund, that's reduced from Q2, and going down in the reports pack, scrolling down, yes, reduction in forecast income for the general fund is reported. Are we going to be monitoring this for trends?
So in terms of trends, from Q2 to Q3 is the one point in the year where you will see some movements, partly because we start to do a lot of our calculations for our internal recharges and recharges to HRA, for instance, and things like that. So it's the one quarter where there are some technical movements more than anything else. We do look at trends. We look at trends in the service, not necessarily quarter on quarter, because again, although quarter on quarter comes to the corporate or to the boards like this, we actually look at our monitoring on a monthly basis. So we look at a bit deeper trends, and we don't just look at the financial, we look at the performance and demand management as well. But yes, we very much look at trends and benchmarking on a monthly, if not quarterly basis.
Thank you. Again, something which I'd like clarification on. We're the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. I see we're also looking at the budget and forecast outturns for strategic planning and environment, housing and community. That's on page 9 of the reports pack. Is that because we are the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, we need to look at everything sort of financial.
Yes, so this committee has to look at the overall financial position. So it looks at all the different departmental areas. If you look at the scrutiny reports that go to the other committees, they will specifically look at the housing and community, or SPIOS will look at their area as well. So whereas this committee looks at all the areas in entirety from that perspective. Some of their reports go into slightly more detail in certain areas because obviously the volume of what they're dealing with is much smaller, but we look at all the important parts is what I would say. Hence is why I come to this committee, and there are other finance colleagues that attend the other committees.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
Clarification, I think. Nigel, I think you've alluded to slippage of projects. And the one that I'm particularly interested in, because I'm being very parochial, is on capital. I noticed that we've taken out the Berkhamsted Leisure Centre development, 13.5 million, right? It was slipped. It's gone beyond slipping here. It's fallen off the budget altogether. Where do we go from this? Do we have any explanation as to what is likely to happen?
So the 24-5 budget that was approved at council last week had the capital programme for the medium term. The Berkhamsted Leisure Centre is programmed in for 25-26. And as that paper alludes to, if a decision is made on leisure strategy and leisure investment earlier than that, those funds could be brought forward if they're required. But given the new administration is looking to look at some options in the summer of 2024, it's unlikely, given the procurement process, for any significant works, for any significant spend to happen in 24-25, which is why it's been slipped to 25-26 and 26-27. So it is in the medium-term capital programme, it's just not in the short-term aspects.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah.
Chair, I've got one more. I just didn't realise that this fell into this particular agenda, and it's on line 171 on page 20. And it's a fantastic initiative, the conversion of the Bury into a museum and gallery, and it's around the figure of £2.6 million. And I wonder, is all of that money coming from the council, or is that money coming from various sources, any outside sources?
So the Bury was put in the capital programme many years ago on the assumption that we would be attracting funding from the Heritage Lottery funding. So the money that was put in there is capital 2.6 has an income line in the capital financing. As of 24-25 onwards in the medium-term capital programme, the Bury has been removed at this point in time. Not because there aren't plans being developed for the Bury, but because the plans that were originally in the programme, which was working with Heritage Lottery funding and other partners to produce something there, are no longer feasible because those grants aren't available. So what's been looked at now with the Bury is what the opportunities are and what the options are. And again, the new administration will have a chance to look at those over the next kind of 6 to 9 months in terms of what direction we want to go in. There's also the added curveball that the Bury will be potentially entirely vacant as of the next general election. For those members that aren't aware at the moment, the current MP uses that as offices, but it's unlikely that the new MP would use that space as an office. So from that perspective, that provides a few more options to the administration to decide what they'd like to do with the venue.
So, Chair, does that mean that this money, because it's quite a lot of money, is kept in here, whereas Councillor Stevens' project in Berkhamsted has been knocked off? Isn't it kind of like similar timelines?
So the reason this has been removed is because it was financed through external financing that's no longer available. Whereas the Berkhamsted Leisure Centre has just been delayed. It's not been knocked off, it's just been delayed because the procurement, for instance, if we were going to refurb either of our leisure centres, you'd be looking at a 6 to 9 month procurement process. So if that decision was made in June this year, the earliest you'd probably get mobilisation would be June next year, which would be 25-26, where we've started that funding. So it's just a case of putting the financing where we want to spend. And that's incredibly important because I have to manage the cash flow of the organisation. And I need to know if I'm spending 15 million this year or next year, because at the moment, I'm getting almost 4% interest on that cash flow. If I think I'm going to spend it in June, I don't commit that to investment. I keep it to one side, and we lose out on that 4% on the £15 million. And we don't want to be doing that. We want to be making use of every penny, which is why the timing of the capital programme is absolutely essential. but there's no significant decisions made in terms of leisure. It's just now around making those decisions and understanding when that timing will happen.
Thank you. And final question from me. If we loop back to the HRA and the pressure that we're under there. So I'm not in any way sort of trying to deflect from the fact that the maintenance and operation costs have gone up quite drastically. And we all know and understand why that is. But a very large amount of the operations of the HRA remain being the depreciation charge and the interest charge, of which we see that the interest charge it doesn't vary from budget. My question mostly around accounting treatment. Are there any possible options available to us in treasury management? Obviously in the general fund where we are managing our treasury, we are able to influence our total interest costs. Is it a case that any treasury management is affecting the general fund and not being reflected in the HRA, or are there some possible areas where the interest charge on the HRA could be managed, could be affected by our treasury management strategy?
So our treasury management strategy looks at the cash flow of the whole council, general fund and HRA, and invests accordingly. The volume of that that's related to the general fund and the volume of that related to the HRA is reflected in the apportionment of the interest that we earn. So if you've got 100 million and 30 million of it is the HRA, 30% of what we make on treasury goes to the HRA. So it's not treated any differently. And in terms of the interest payable for the HRA, that is all on loans that were taken out before this year, predominantly from the loans that were taken out in 2013 when the HRA self-financing model took place. They are fixed for 20, 30, 40-year loans. So from that perspective, they're fairly consistent.
Just to sort of satisfy me, if we were in a position where it was possible to refinance for less than the rates in 2013, I realise that obviously that's not a feasible suggestion, but if hypothetically that happened, then we could see the charge, the interest rate falling by the fact that we went out and refinanced.
We look at refinancing all the time. So to some members of this committee from last year, I think Councillor Elliott was one, will know that we made a decision to make a repayment of a £10 million loan because we were offered very favourable rates by the government to repay that loan. In fact, they reduced the amount we had to repay back, and we were paying interest. So at that moment in time, that was made very, very acceptable to us. We look at that on an almost daily basis in terms of our offerings, and we have external treasury advisors, link management, who will let us know of any opportunities that come about for refinancing, and that is part of our ongoing daily treasury management. So, just to give a little bit of an insight into treasury management, we make investments to council of probably about £7 or £8 million a week. So that might be £1 million investments, 2 million, 3, 5, but that's how much cash flow is flowing in and out of the organisation on a weekly basis. And that is all very carefully managed and operated through very strict treasury management principles and with the advice of external advisors, and obviously overseen by myself.
Okay, but am I correct though that when you're doing the treasury management to get an interest return, that interest return is only coming into the general fund? It's not netting off the interest costs on the HRA?
The interest comes to the council based on what we've invested, and how much of that investment is general fund and how much is HRA depends on where that interest goes. The HRA investments are likely to have ended by the end of this year because our HRA will be borrowing for a lot of the investments they're doing. They have no cash in the cash flow or very limited. So the interest that they're earning, so this year they've earned £1.8 million in interest returns because we've been investing their cash balances. That will be looking to drop off in future years, and that is planned in the business case for the HRA.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Juris.
Thank you. A couple of questions. First of all, can I welcome the new portfolio holder for finance, and it's good to see you here.
Thank you.
Right, 4.3, clarification please, if you would. Additional staffing costs across the directorate, £206,000. and that's an increase of 72,000. Do I take from that that the figure at the end of Q2 was 134,000, or is it actually an actual increase of 206 over 72?
Well, your initial assumption is correct.
That's,
134,000 has increased to 206,000.
so on that basis, is the additional 72 a 1 quarter one-off, or is that going to be an ongoing increase?
It is a projected cost from the point of Q2 to year end in terms of the cost that will be incurred.
Thank you. Does that give you any cause for concern?
Not all overspends give me a cause for concern. Anywhere where we need additional resources instantly gives me a cause of concern. But there are controls and balances in place as to why these things happen. They're approved through the normal channels. And so SLT members a lot of the time are approving these decisions. This is around investing more in our HR and our people strategy, which again, I think committee have seen multiple versions of. And this is about how we can make sure we deliver that people strategy and deliver some of the details behind that. Unfortunately, during the year, there's had to be a certain amount of agency and consultants used to deliver that strategy because we've not been able to recruit, or we've had permanent employees that have been off for various reasons, which is why you're seeing a reasonable overspend in that area. But it is one of the key core strategies that the council are aiming for.
Possibly a question, if I may, for Matt on that as a follow-up. The additional numbers, are they, or the interims, are they blue collar or white collar?
Typically white collar.
Can you elaborate a little bit on which departments they might fall in?
I'd have to come back to you on that. I think I'm not specifically.
So in terms of those posts, the 206,000 is predominantly white collar in the transformation and HR service. So it is the people who are overseeing the people strategy and the support that the council needs from its HR advisors. And equally from our transformation programme management office that's overseeing, I think, 35 projects at the moment. So from that perspective, they've been having to have resources at certain times throughout the year. And for resources not to be there would mean that projects aren't delivered.
Can I turn to 5.1, neighbourhood operations, and the second paragraph, which talks of fleet services seen an increase, which led to a forecast pressure on fleet repairs and maintenance of £52,000 in quarter three. £52,000 for maintenance on fleet seems a lot of money, and I wonder if there's any colour that you can give to that.
So we have an overall fleet that's worth about £30 million. So in terms of maintenance, it's not, one waste lorry is about £250,000. If that needs a significant piece of work, you're looking at thousands of pounds. So an increase of 50,000 over a 6-month period is not significant. It would feel significant if we take our car to the car works and it's £400, we're absolutely gutted. If we take a waste vehicle, sometimes getting it to where it needs to be in the northwest might cost us the best part of £1,000 before they've even looked at it. So maintenance in terms of the size of the fleet and the difficulty of that, it's not a huge increase. We are fighting a lot with our fleet at the moment, and we're working with the provider of our fleet to make some improvements to that. And we're also looking at some of the schedules we have in terms of our ongoing repairs to try and reduce some of the reactive repairs that are taking place. But it is an ongoing fight, not just for the council, but for many councils across the country in terms of fleet management when you've got a large waste and green services fleet.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any further questions on Councillor Stickland?
Picking up from what Councillor Joyce was referring to, section 5, table 5 on page 11. Place tells us that we have got a huge variance of £700,000 against an original budget of £850,000. We've got the explanation in the paragraphs there, but I don't think we've got sufficient explanations to why we've got such a huge increase in the forecast.
So the main reason for the difference in the forecast is planning, income and land charges, which is alluded to in paragraph 5.2. In terms of the Place Directorate, it looks out of kilter because the net budget is 850,000. They've got a large expenditure budget and a large income budget, of which that's where they're suffering the shortfall. It's on the income. Planning is around 1.3 million in terms of income. Because of the planning moratorium and also because of the state of the current economic climate, they're seeing far less planning applications come in and far less bigger development plans come forward. Now, part of that is the belief that the planning moratorium slowed a lot of things down. People had uncertainty over when that would be released. Now it has been. We haven't quite seen the pickup that we expected, but the significant element of that, 60–70% of that pressure is created by the lack of income from planning permissions.
Thank you.
I believe that's all the questions to wrap up item 7. So we'll move on to agenda item 8, and I'd like to welcome Catherine. Great, camera's just come on. So I should have mentioned before, Catherine was joining us virtually. So if I can turn to you to introduce this item, please.
Thank you. Good evening, all. I'm sorry I can't be there in person tonight. Hopefully everybody can hear me. We have our usual quarterly performance report for Corporate and Commercial Directorate. You'll hopefully have had a chance to read through that, so I'll hand over to the team to give their usual brief overviews before we open for questions. Just one thing to note before I do, which is the fact that obviously Councillor Capozzi is now the portfolio holder for Corporate and Commercial, so apologies, that should have read as such in the report title. I believe it still says Councillor Tyndall. So turning now to the performance report, I'll hand over to the team and pass over first to Ben Hosier.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I will take it that the report has been read. And just take you through the main highlights in section 2.1, table 1 and table 2. Just refer to the number of times procurement standing orders have been set aside to award contracts, and the number of known non-compliant procurements and the reasons and mitigations behind those. And then there's a very brief update on where we are with our current commercial strategy and programme. And an update on that, and I certainly don't intend to talk you through that. But there are some other commercial-related projects that are also underway, and will be the commercial income review, which will at some stage come to this committee, the garage portfolio review, which forms part of the wider strategic asset review, and again, an update on that will come to this committee. And you'd all be aware of the electric vehicle charge point programme, and then there will be a separate programme that will be looking at garage pricing in the future. So if there are any questions, we'll take them at the end, but I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's quarter 3 usual performance information contained in the report, so I won't go through it in any detail, but section 3.1 highlights some positive results we've had in the courts in the last quarter. Most of the other work from the service, apart from routine matters, is certainly focused on the Police and Crime Commissioner election on the 2nd of May and preparations for what we know will be a general election at some point, probably in the autumn. But we're sort of on tenterhooks, hoping they don't call it on very short notice. But other than that, happy to take any questions once we get to that stage.
Just to pick on the finance elements of the report, from the performance report, there are 3 areas alluded to in terms of red risks. 2 of them, the HRA variance and the capital variance, we've alluded to in the earlier report, and the 3rd one is around the debtors' day. Again, there is a lot of information in the report to explain the rationale as to why the total volume of debtor days has been increasing. Overall, in terms of pre-COVID to now, we've got 3 times many clients on payment plans than we had before, which means they are paying, but they're paying slower than they have done historically, hence the number of debtor days increasing. It is something that we are looking at in the medium term. The wider economic pressures are being felt by our businesses, which are our commercial portfolio, which is 90% of our debt. So we are looking at how we can look at reporting that and providing a little bit more information in the medium term to members. In addition to that, just to allude to something that is coming up, which many of you might get knocks on your doors from local businesses. For some of you, you'll remember that the business rates revaluation happened last year, so the start of April 2023. But what the government did is they did a transitional relief. So although the rates went up a lot, they stepped it over 3 years. So your local businesses are going to see their business rates going up year on year every April, which is going to make it more difficult for them to pay their bills, including the bills to ourselves. It's going to make it a bit harder for the businesses in a very tight economic situation. So you may get more and more businesses contacting you about their ability to pay business rates. We don't set the business rates. We just send the bills out and collect the money. They're set by what's called the valuation office at central government. So although we do try to help and work with our businesses, whether they're in our properties or not, we don't control what they have to pay for that. So that's just something to keep in mind if businesses are knocking on your door. The second aspect of the report in terms of risks, there are 2 items that are raised there. There's a benefit in terms of a reduced risk on the delays in processing benefit claims, because we're seeing a much improved performance there, and the number of days has dropped to very, very low levels. So from that perspective, there's good news. And the other risk is around collection rates, which has been there all year. Just alluding to what I just said about business rates, we are seeing slightly lower business rates, but broadly in line with last year, but lower than pre-COVID times, and council tax collection is slightly lower than pre-COVID times, but year on year slightly higher than what it was last year. But again, people paying their bills in the end of year summary will give a better picture of that, because the last couple of months of the year for council tax is critical, partly because of 10 monthly payments and partly because that's when we are able a lot of the time to chase any outstanding debts. So we'll get a better picture at year end. Nothing else to say in regards to the report. Open to questions at that point.
Thank you. I think we open up for questions. We'll start with Councillor Santa Maria.
This is probably a communication thing, but we've got council tax and hopefully, improving the debt collection rate. Obviously, they're going to be introducing universal credit quite soon, and that will cause a lot of people's benefits to stop, because the housing benefit will stop. Is it possible for us to put in letters going out regarding housing benefit, or also the council tax, to include something saying if you are going on to universal credit, you will need to reclaim council tax reduction, because otherwise they won't necessarily know to do that? Is that something that can be actioned possibly?
So we'll take a little bit of a step back for the wider group. Universal credit, hopefully everybody's heard of over the last 5 or 6 years. The government are looking to roll out more claimants onto universal credit in 24-25. It's still unclear as to how many and which groups of individuals they'll transfer over. We think it's only going to be between 5 or 10% of our current client base, so it's not going to be a huge amount of change in decorum, but it will be a change. And as Councillor Santa Maria alludes to, historically when people have moved over, DWP, central government, are not very good in their communication chain in terms of what these residents need to do. We are now part of that chain, unlike in previous years. We very much liaise with the users before central government do, just so they know what's going to happen. There are certain things these claimants need to do to make sure the timing doesn't create financial difficulties for often the most financially vulnerable in the borough. One of them is making sure they still claim council tax support, because irrelevant of universal credit, that's an additional item, and sometimes that's missed off. So we're starting that communication drive now. We are awaiting more details from government to understand who will be impacted, so that we can target that communication on those individuals that need to know. We very much work with them. We know how this works. We've gone through this process over several years, and we're very much gearing up to provide that support. So hopefully it won't have a huge impact. What I would also say is those that are likely to move to universal credit, although we have a very high collection rate, that small percentage of less than 1% that don't generally pay are the ones that are claiming the most benefits and the most impacted. So it will have an impact on the user and the resident, absolutely, which is why we do the work we do, but it's unlikely to have a significant impact on collection rates from that perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to sneak in with my question because it's also crossing into communications, but it's actually up to Mark. With regards on the legal side, when we have had a successful case, we tend to have a reasonably similarly structured press statement that goes out. My question is the structure of that press statement something that's sort of formally required, or is it just sort of a sort of habit that we've got into?
I mean, it's a pretty standard approach to press releases for prosecutions that we put forward, and we put it out there as much as anything as a deterrent to others to take a check on their practices and ensure they're not doing anything unlawful as well, and to show that the council is serious and we take action where required. So it is a pretty standard approach, that we follow. We try and sort of balance it. So we're not sort of shouting about individuals too much, but we need to be clear what the offence has been.
Okay, so we do have some flexibility in it if we felt that was it was in the council's interests to taper it in a certain case.
A little, yeah. I'd like to see consider specific amendments, I think, but we have to be a little bit cautious with our approach.
Okay. Any further questions, councillors? Stuart.
This one before. Page 40, RBF06. Average days taken to respond to a council tax related contact from a resident. Are these working days or calendar days?
You have asked this question before. They are working days, but the name of that KPI is inaccurate. It's not to respond to a council tax query, it's to resolve a council tax query, which is why when you read the narrative, it explains about the complexity of a lot of the council tax queries we've been getting, particularly in the last couple of years, are far more complex than previously. Things like universal credit have been coming into this, but also we have more and more people who are working very different in terms of 0-hour contracts or in terms of self-employed, which increases the complexity of those cases, which often means there's a lot of to and fro between ourselves and the end user.
No, it's good to see the benefits related contacts.
Yeah, the benefits where it's easier, where it's extremely quick. Yeah. The council tax ones, which requires also on some quite outdated processes of getting certain forms from a user, can end up being a lot slower.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to, if I could have a response on why that seems to have ticked up and what could be done to tick it down.
Exactly. One of the things we're going through a restructuring of revenues and benefits service to create more aligned services and job descriptions so the same people can deal with both sides of that service area. Hoping as well to pick up a few synergies in terms of how they deal with customers as well, which hopefully will bring a few more improvements. Equally, with working with Sarge and his team on a lot of citizen access to some of these portals so that citizens can put in their own information rather than sending it to us, which will speed that process up as well. And hopefully that will come out in 2024.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions?
Just a quick one. Can you just tell me, are there any of these debts that are written off year by year? And if so, what are the figures?
I don't have the figures to hand, but I can provide them in terms of write-offs. Yes, we write off council tax on a quarterly basis. Again, we have a policy in terms of what's written off and why it's written off. Predominantly, it's where we have sought all avenues to reclaim those funds. They're all normally very old as well. The vast majority, I'd say about 70% off the top of my head, are normally deceased individuals or estates where we've got no course to chase those funds.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, then I will move on to agenda item 9, which is the performance report for the People Transformation Strategy. So coming back to Catherine.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, good to see you. You're doing the introduction.
Catherine is more than welcome. Let's do it. So this is a shorter than usual report because we've got two deep dives into, or a deep dive into two of my services, customer services and people. So the paper only covers digital and our communications function. So I'll just give you a very quick canter through those two, and perhaps we can devote more of the time to these two. these two follow-up papers. So on digital and IT, a bit of a mixed bag of performance over the last quarter. The availability of systems continues to be, and has been for quite a long time now, very strong. So we're very pleased about that, and as it says, it kind of is a reflection of our strength of our kind of technology infrastructure. Incidents resolved tipped below the target of 90%. That can be directly attributed to a couple of vacancies in the team, which we've now resolved, and we can see that in January performance that has gone back above target, which is encouraging. In terms of digital and ICT, a couple of things to draw out. One, the purchase of the new digital platform, which is possibly slightly understated in this paragraph, but will be the platform, not just the technical platform, but the actual platform for us making some really quite significant improvements and transformations over the coming months and years. So to watch the space for the impact of that. Secondly, a lot of work rightly around our cybersecurity position. So you hopefully are aware, and by the very fact that you're looking at laptops, you're using our multi-factor authentication. We received public sector network compliance certification again, which is a good standard, a strong standard for us to hit, and proof that we're doing a decent job. We're now moving towards Cyber Essentials Plus accreditation, which is kind of a step above that, which we hope to achieve in the next few months. We're doing a lot of other work behind the scenes, which will continue to solidify our work on cyber security. In terms of communications, we have an ongoing program of work. Quarter 3 tends to be quite busy in terms of events. We have Halloween and Christmas events and Remembrance Day. Those were very successful, well attended, and positive feedback received. We're doing quite a big push on our internal communications, kind of interlinked with some of Matt's work around encouraging and strengthening our retention of staff. So there's a number of elements that we've brought in over the last few months to really engage with our staff, and our work in terms of our external work around the number of newsletters we have, the readership of those, our social media activity, again, continues to grow. There are and there always will be areas where we can look to improve as we understand kind of the changing nature of our residents and how they wish to engage with us, but the team are really, really keen to do that. So that is a very brief canter through those two particular services. Very happy to take any questions that you may have.
Councillor Adeleke.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I don't have a question, you will be pleased to know, but I just want to go to item 7.5, just to commend you and your team that the information you put on social media is extremely good. I find it very useful, and I get a lot of feedback from my residents that they follow everything that we put on social media platforms. So they're getting more and more information about it. So I want to commend you and your team on that. And the second part is the response time we get from your team in terms of solving problems for us on computer and everything is greatly improved. Waiting time is completely shortened. You pick up your phone, get through straight away. So just my thanks to your team.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adeleke. I'm just going to throw in a comment on that myself as well. I recall raising with you at our village fair day when our first election, but just a little reminder, one tool that I think would be very useful, sort of tied into especially social media side, is a database that councillors and staff as well could access. Because we have so many different communication mediums, it's quite possible that our residents will see something that we as councillors don't see. So I like the idea that there is a database where we'd be able to look on and be able to just see the copy of everything that went out onto any platform, so we can reference that if somebody has a query.
So you, either by good fortune or great planning, we had a chat this morning with the team about the production of or kind of something similar. So we're hopeful in a very short space of time that we'll be able to share something with you all, which hopefully you'll find useful.
Fantastic. Especially because, you know, I'm feeling very old in the fact that, you know, when I think I know all of the social media platforms, a new one comes along. Generally involving dancing. Councillor Duras.
We're staying off those.
You may be aware that recently Decorum Borough Council has attracted some quite significant adverse publicity via BBC Three Counties Radio, and listening to some of it as I go along, I get the feeling that there is a level of frustration on the part of Three Counties Radio with the quality and the effectiveness and the timeliness of the communication from the communications team in response to their questions. You're nodding, so you're obviously aware of this situation. Are you completely comfortable with the performance of the communications team in those areas of, if you like, public awareness through the national media, shall we say, to make sure also that Decorum Borough Council is not seen in anything less than a very positive light?
So short answer, yes.
Would you like to expand on that?
Yes, yes. Slightly longer answer is, in those particular instances, we're dealing with a very specific situation, but one that was about our interpretation of the law, not the communication team's interpretation of the law, but our council's interpretation of the law. So it's very important that we are clear on exactly what we've done, but also very clear on exactly what our interpretation of the law is. So sometimes, and in fact quite often, it's not for the communication, it's very wrong for the communications team to immediately type out a response to a journalist. Actually, we need to make sure we understand the situation, and that can take time. And frankly, journalists can wait till we've done that properly. Similarly, from our point of view as an organisation, it's quite within our rights, and indeed can be the proper and right course of action not to continue to feed a media storm. So if we have made a statement and we stand by our statement, just because a journalist would like to hear more from us, doesn't mean that we should go back and change our statement or add additional points. So what we've done in the situations you've referred to, we've said, this is our statement, this is our understanding, this is our position. And when the journalist has come back and said, oh, we'd like to do another segment about it, we refer them back to their original position, because it still stands. Now, that may well be frustrating for a journalist because they want to create noise. They want to have another angle. They want a different discussion. But from our point of view as a council, that's not what we want. We stand by our position. So I get that a journalist may well be frustrated, but from a council point of view, I'm very, very comfortable with how the communications team have handled what's been quite tricky and quite a nuanced conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any further questions? No? Okay, so we'll close that and we will move on to agenda item 10. This is the People Service update, so we're looking to Pat to introduce.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My plan is to run through some of the key items of this report. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to read it. So this was in response to the Chair of Finance and Resource Overview Scrutiny Committee, requested a paper on specific areas in relation to the people service, namely recruitment, staff turnover, and sickness. So I'll take them one by one. So a bit of context around recruitment. The current vacancy rate is circa around 15%. A rate of 5–10% is generally seen as typical, but the closer to zero, the better, as you can imagine. Our current rate is impacted by a number of vacant posts that we're holding for pending restructures, principally around the housing team and the legal services team. If we were to exclude those held vacancies, the rate is more in the region of 11%. Having said that, I think there is an absolute appreciation that we need to move this closer to zero as possible. And some of the key initiatives that we are undertaking is that we now have a new monthly vacancy tracker, our strategic leadership team, where I go and present the vacancy status, and chief officers will get some assurance from me that my team's working with the with services to ensure that vacancies are being properly moved on in an efficient manner. We have introduced market forces payments recently across some areas where recruitment and retention issues have been apparent, and this seems to be having a positive impact on those particular areas. We have been working with key partners in the community to support the increased employment opportunities. So I have a meeting tomorrow actually at West Arts College. We have an extensive work experience programme that's going to be rolled out this summer. As opposed to previous years, we've not been necessarily, I think, as proactive as we should be with work experience. And it's all these little things that can certainly help the organisation become that employer of choice. So we start to get that pipeline through for people wanting to work for the council. So the second element was staff turnover. Our annual staff turnover percentage, and you would see this as a regular item on the reports, is currently at 13%, and that's across the year. Healthy staff turnover rate in the UK is anywhere between 10 and 15%. So that leaves me in a position where I think we're in a good position around staff turnover. It's healthy to have some staff turnover. You want to get new people into the organisation. So that's a positive. However, we don't necessarily rest on our laurels with that. I think staff turnover is important. It's certainly an indicator of how happy people are as working for the organisation. So I'll just highlight some of the key initiatives that we've got to ensure that this continues. So we are looking at a mandatory management training programme, which we haven't got in place at the moment. So this will be a first for Decorum, where it will focus on key skills and competencies that we expect managers to have. And there will be a management programme that people will need to follow, and the infrastructure around that will be in place as well to ensure that it's performance managed correctly, and people are assessed against those competencies. So we're currently working that through. We have a really active equality and diversity inclusion working group. We have one individual that leads that, is the lead EDI officer. And we've got some exciting projects going across the year. We're celebrating and recognising key events across 2024. The next one being International Women's Day, which is tomorrow. No, sorry, it's Friday actually, sorry. And we've got a week of events that we're going to be doing. We're going to be hosting a women's equality group, and that'll be a regular item. And it's about identifying where, if there are issues in the workplace for any protected characteristics, we are actively working on that to resolve some of the issues that we find from those groups. We have a future talent programme that we are also embarking on, and this will be to ensure that our future talent has an opportunity to potentially go through that management training programme that we'll be focusing on. And we've just recently launched a coaching scheme, which is something I'm an advocate of. And this went out recently, and we've now got quite a few staff interested in becoming a qualified coach, which means that they are accessible across the organisation to help people where coaching is in need. And we also will be running out a mentoring scheme for the same reasons. So lastly, sickness absence. Context around this, sickness outturn for quarter 3 has been more than last quarter, and it's an average of around 11 to 12 sickness days per FTE. The main reasons for these increases are to do with flu, colds, stress and musculoskeletal. The area of the highest sickness falls within our neighbourhood operations team, which is probably no surprise, which consists of mainly frontline services. So that's the waste and clean, safe and green, where the nature of this work is more likely to result in absence. So our high levels of sickness are consistent across all sectors, including the public sector. So our figures are not necessarily out of sync. A CIPD recent survey showed that around 11 days per FTE was apparent in the public sector. We have to be careful with that because you need to be comparing apples with apples. So sometimes comparing other industries or other organisations where they potentially have less frontline workers, it's very difficult to get an accurate picture of whether we're performing good or bad. So my view is that we should always be focusing on how we're doing as an organisation. So the trend of going up or down is probably the better indicator rather than comparing with others. So just very quickly, sorry, I've gone on probably longer than I should have done, but some of the key initiatives around sickness absence. We are trialling an on-site physio at QP Green because there was a musculoskeletal problems within the service. So we're looking at being proactive in terms of making sure that people don't go off sick. It's a way of preventing them going off sick. So we have an on-site physio, which is a day a week, and it's been currently used very well at the moment. That's on trial. Many of you will be aware that we've recently launched the menopause policy, which is about supporting staff to achieve that better work-life balance. We have introduced weekly sickness management and HR meetings at QP Green because we identify, as I mentioned earlier, this is a higher area of a concern, but a realistic concern in terms of the nature of the jobs they're doing. And we are running a program out of wellness checks across the organisation where people have almost a human MOT. So it's about checking vital kind of conditions or diabetes, and there's an opportunity for people to go along and get a free check. So I'm sorry I've gone on for a lot of time, but happy to take on any questions.
Great, thanks very much. I was just going to throw a question myself in there first, and apologies for the tone of it. So first of all, thank you very much for the report. Lots of really good stuff there, and obviously it reads very, very well. Now I'm just finding I'm a little bit incredulous on that, mainly because we've sort of discussed some of the staff challenges with the council for several years now. There's a few things on. When I'm looking at this, it all looks good. So, quick question: are our staff problems over?
So I think every single organisation will have staff issues, and I think it is peaks and troughs. I think sickness is comparable, I think, to public sector, and I think also it's probably a little bit higher than I'd want it to be. The trend's not going in the right direction, so that's why we're trying to make a focused effort in trying to look at the areas where there's high sickness, such as QP Green. So we're trying to make a targeted area to try and put some HR interventions and management interventions to support that. There's still going to be challenges around recruitment because that is potentially out of our control. The market's difficult. Again, what we're trying to do is put ourselves in the best position to ensure that we can get people through the door that are of good quality and people are not leaving. So all of this work in the whole tries to mitigate any staff problems, but we're always going to have pockets of it.
Okay, it's just the way things read at the moment, the way I've read this report, it seems to be sort of, we're checking ourselves compared to a few benchmarks. We seem to be okay with those benchmarks. So it's almost like saying, this is the BAU, this is what our normal operation is going to be now, rather than, I think previously we were accepting that we had a number of vacancies and difficulties getting the right people into the right roles fast enough. So that's, you kind of get my tone. I'm just slightly incredulous that the report is saying that everything's great now, whereas I still see that there's, we might be getting to the end of our operational journey, but I'm not, I'm just not quite thinking that we're in green pastures yet.
That's a fair comment. I think we're on a journey still, and there's still some probably barriers. Apologies if you've read it that way. That it's completely a rosy picture. It is getting rosier, I think, and hopefully with all the initiatives that we put in place, it can support and mitigate some of that.
Okay, thank you. I just thought that was a good thing to clarify. But again, there are some great things in there and definitely showing some trajectory. Right, so we've got Councillor Adeleke first up, and if I get other people to raise their hands as well, because I think I missed a couple. Right.
Thank you, Chair. I just sent two questions, if I may. The first one is on the graduate program. Two questions on that one. Are these 3 graduates, are they recruited local people or from outside? And if I can just wrap it up. And the second question is, what have you put in place that when they complete their training, we are going to get a bit of money's worth out of them before they disappear? So that's the first question. Chair, do you want me to answer?
Yeah, you can go on to the second.
And the second question is about the long-term sickness. You've explained to us or given examples of why the general sickness because of flu and this. On the long-term side, what do you think is the main cause, or what are the causes of the long-term sickness that you think?
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the graduates, so we've employed people from the National Graduate Development Programme, which is run by the East of England Local Government Association. It's a programme that we've used for probably 10 plus years, and it's been very successful. So in terms of whether it's local, the 3 people that we've got in, I don't know, actually, if I'm being completely honest, because it's a national scheme and people can move here. But I know in the past we certainly have employed local people. Typically they are from the local area, but it doesn't stop people coming from further afield. The training, and I understand that in terms of, you're investing a lot of time and money into these individuals, and although you're getting a lot of good work from them in that period of time, it's what next? And that has been a challenge because the National Graduate Development Programme is an ongoing scheme, so we have a budget for 3 per year, and at the end of that, there's not a job for them. But what we try and do is we work closely in the last 3 to 6 months of their placement to ensure we know what they're interested in and what we think their skills are. So there is a plan in place to try and keep them. So if we build a long enough process of time in place, we can work with the managers when vacancies come up to try and keep them in the organisation. Certainly the ones that we want to keep, and I'm sure we want to keep them all. But yeah, so and then the long-term sick main cause, I haven't put it in because it's very random, and there's not one necessarily trend that I can say it's for that reason why people are long-term sick. The main one tends to be stress and anxiety is always pretty high, and also serious illness, which we've seen quite a lot of lately, which is particularly difficult and sad to deal with, where we've had people that have a serious illness, and we have to obviously manage that process appropriately.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 questions here. The first one refers to recruitment and what our vacancy rate is if we take out the on-hold vacancies, like an underlying vacancy rate of 11%. That's just above the 5 to 10% that's seen as optimal. So do we have a trend in vacancy rates over the last few financial years?
A trend in the number?
Yeah, trend in what the vacancy rate is, the underlying vacancy rate, taking out the on-hold vacancies.
Not over a long period of time, because this is a new kind of measurement. So this is part of the strategic leadership team, and I have been working together to make sure that we understand what that trend is, so that we know what the vacancy rate is, and we can put in interventions to ensure that we try and bring that down.
I'll throw a general answer to you just through knowing every quarter where we've had a report from you before we've been able to break that down in detail. It's always been sitting around the 15%. So it's certainly an improvement on anything that's come to this committee in the last few years. But again, that 15% was a general one rather than looking at specific sides.
Looking at staff sickness absence, and the report's highlighted the work done to address long-term sickness and the preventative work done about musculoskeletal issues at Cupid Green. But is there any work going in to address repeated frequent short-term sickness?
Yeah, there is work going on. So basically every month we have a sickness scrutiny group that will analyse all the sickness from the previous month. And that gives us an opportunity to look at where people are potentially using the policy in a way to be manipulative, so that we have trends, we have targets, triggers as part of that process. But we have a group that can identify that actually if people are going off every Monday, or they have a sickness target, they meet that target and then they go off sick directly after that. Because there's ways of playing the system, and what this group is about is to ensure that that system is not being played, so we can escalate that to a formal process if we feel that those situations are occurring.
Thank you.
Councillor Duras.
Sorry, may I just come back on that one, Councillor Guest? You will find that we've got a very, very good sickness policy, and I think most councils have got a very, very good sickness policy. If someone's off sick, they don't get SSP, they get full pay for literally 6 months, and then they get half pay for the next 6 months. So if you do get people going off sick, like Matt was saying, they may be off sick a couple of days, 1 month, they'll get paid full pay. A couple of days off sick next month, you'll get full pay, and people will manipulate the system, and that is very, very hard to do. But say the team are literally on the idea of exactly how they're going to overcome this. But that's all I can say. Thanks.
May I come back? So, yeah, just to add to that, I'm pretty sure there's not many other local authorities that have a sickness policy which actually can stop occupational sick pay. We managed to get this through about 10 years ago, where if those situations do occur and people are on attendance targets and they don't achieve them, we can stop occupational sick pay, which was done in line with the Hertfordshire County Council route, where they were stopping occupational sick pay. And at that point, it was felt that local authorities would adopt that, and there's not many local authorities that were able to get that through the unions, and we are one of them. However, there is pressure on me to be looking at that again from the unions all the time, as you can imagine. But I think it's one of the strongest around, because we have that opportunity and that flexibility in that to actually utilise that clause when we feel it's appropriate to.
Thank you.
Councillor Duras.
Yes, thank you. Page 62, you make reference to the apprenticeship levy. I just wonder how are we doing with the usage of the apprenticeship levy? Because I know that in other places there is a potential for it to build up, and it's not always easy to actually spend it or deliver it to members of staff.
That's very true, and it's a problem we are having. Like Nigel was saying, that we've got a bit of extra resource to try and focus on these areas in my team. One of the jobs has been they're going to be looking at is how we can better spend that. The problem you have with the apprentice levy, I don't know if people know that the framework exists for organisations they have obviously a levy that we have to put in every month to go towards the apprentice levy. The framework of training is not brilliant, because it takes longer for people to get qualified on that framework than what it would be if they went outside it. So I've got managers saying to me, well, I'm not going to put them through the apprentice levy, although that's money that could be used. It's cheaper to go elsewhere. I don't have to put them on one day a week training, and it takes twice as long. So I'm constantly in a battle to say, we need to spend this, and actually it's a good way of doing it against the practical issues that the managers are saying to me, that's not working for me. So we are, the coaching scheme that I mentioned, I've got 5 people that are interested in it, and that can be done via the apprentice levy, so that's a massive tick. So I'm doing all I can to try and spend it. We are also looking to trial HGV driving as an option at Keep It Green as well via that levy. Again, and I don't blame the managers, I'm having to fight for that because it's difficult for them because they've got to take a driver off for one day a week to then do their training, and that comes at a cost. So we're doing our best, we're doing okay, it's moving in the right direction.
And I think it's fair to say it's a fairly clumsy levy, because if you don't allocate it within a certain period of time, it actually goes back to the government. And yes, there's every opportunity or every incentive to do it, but I understand and accept the frustrations of it.
For all.
For all,
yes,
indeed. Can I just, a couple of other things, my questions are normally fairly short, without a great long preamble. I should need to keep that one for William. Call wait times, good that it's come down to 257 seconds. Do we happen to know what the, is there a benchmark figure across local authorities? Because there seems to be benchmarks for pretty much everything. How do we, if there is, how do we fare?
So we don't have a benchmark figure that I can give you today. What we do know is people do it in different ways. A lot of councils use call satisfaction levels as a way to measure performance. I've got Tracy here as the customer services manager. I don't know whether we have any data or benchmark.
But we benchmark, so I meet with all the other Hertfordshire customer service managers, but you're never comparing apples with apples. So some will include their switchboard stats to give you their answer times, when actually the switchboard is an automated machine. We don't. So ours are true, ours are actual waiting. Some don't deliver the volume of services, some are much smaller boroughs, so it's very hard to pitch where you are. We do share data.
My apologies, I was so excited by...
You were ahead of the game.
Yeah, well, I was so enthralled by the apprenticeship levy that I was ahead of the game. So I will ask you the same question again. No.
I was thinking that. I was just like, do I try to move this onto the other?
I do have one other question that relates to employment.
This agenda item?
Who said that?
Councillor Hannell.
Yeah, right, okay. I know that I've in the past made reference to this. Do we, and I will continue to make reference to it, do we seek wherever possible, or where possible, not wherever, but where possible, to offer employment to care leavers?
There's no preferential treatment for care leavers.
I thought we actually put in to the recruitment policy a reference.
Was that not the equality impact assessment?
Was it? It might have been. Because it was a couple of years ago that we did it.
I think it was. It was just the carers element was factored into the community impact assessment.
And are we? Because I'm acutely aware of care leavers across the county.
Yeah.
And that's really all I wanted to sort of ask or say, so if we don't lose sight of it, if we do get the opportunity, to give them some level of benefit, because some of them, let's be honest, have come through some brilliant rough times.
I understand. We just need to balance that against the obviously employment law aspects. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hannell.
Yeah, my item is agenda item 10. I'd just like to ask Matt, if I can, if he'd be able to provide us with information about the amount of staff who are on long-term sick who been waiting so long for surgery, they've exhausted their full pay, then moving through their half pay, and then now moving to capability because they've been waiting so long for surgery. So I think that's possibly a significant increase in the last, I'm going to say 5 to 10 years. And I just like that, to see that figure, because I don't think that was an issue that we had, I'm going to say 15 years ago. But I'm certainly noticing that in public services. And I think, you know, I'm not massively interested in the manipulators because I think they're a small amount. Those people on long-term sick, I think they actually represent a much more significant number of people who are on sick for a long period. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I come on that one, Scott? Yeah, thank you for that question. I think I'd be a bit concerned with telling people or saying who's on long-term sick. I don't think we ought to be. If you're asking, you want to know how many people. I just get a bit concerned that we are sort of informing councillors, staff of people that are on long-term sick. To me, it's personal, if you like. I mean, somebody could be on long-term sick because of cancer or something else. I'll just be a bit careful how we produce that information for you. I'm not saying we won't do it, but I want to be a little bit careful how we produce that information for you. It's just
let's take that offline because I think it's something that Mark would need to rule on. But at a guess, and again we would need Mark on it. I think that it could be supplied to us all as councillors, but it couldn't be supplied in this meeting because there is an element of confidential data that goes on that. But I think it's a fair request, but it probably needs Mark to comment as to how that can be communicated back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
No, as in Mark being to know as in what goes under part 2 and whatnot. Sorry, you would need to present it, but I'm thinking that Mark would have to rule as to whether it could come to committee or not. Apologies if I'm speaking out of turn, that's just my suspicion.
Yeah, a number of staff that have exhausted their full pay and have moved down to half pay.
Yeah, we can. I wouldn't have an issue with that. Again, I will make sure that legally we're able to do what we need to do in terms of presentation from a
I'm just asking for a percentage of staff.
Yeah.
That should be fine.
Okay.
Chair, just to pick up a point, it can come to this committee, but it would have to come to this committee as a part 2 item. I think what you were alluding to, and I'm not prejudging what Mark's view would be, I think you were almost suggesting that it should come outside the committee structure, and I would suggest it should be in the committee structure, but as a part 2 item, if that is appropriate.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm speaking on things that I'm not qualified to. I was trying to address the fact that I agreed that there's a potential concern, and I was basically trying to defer to Mark on that, but quite happy if Matt is comfortable on what can be supplied. But we'll let the officers take that away rather than trying to debate it here and now. Okay, Councillor Adeleke.
So just a very quick point is, I think I agree with what the chair has been saying, and I'm really overly concerned about this, of what benefit this information is for us. It's very private, really private and personal when you have to be asking whether somebody is waiting for surgery, then what next you want to ask for. So I am not so sure, even if we receive the information, of what benefit is it to this committee. But I don't know. That's what we want to do with it.
Well, I think that it's a valid request for a councillor to make, but I'll let the officers determine if that is able to be given. Okay, thank you for that. I think that wraps up item 10, which brings us on to item 11, the customer services update. And I think we can guess what question might be coming. So, Serge, are you introducing this one?
Thank you, Chair. So, like the previous item, this item has been brought in because the Chair asked us for a deep dive into customer services. So, what we normally report to oversee here is a key performance measure of call wait times with a target of 300 seconds. And before I go into the detail of call wait times, just do want to note that the customer services team not only just answer calls, they also respond to inquiries via email and social media. They also man the reception, offer face-to-face appointments, and also provide a face-to-face service at Berkhamsted and Tring. So much more than just answering calls. So performance has been a challenge over the past year. We've struggled to meet the 300 seconds target for a number of reasons, primarily because demand doesn't match the resource profile that we have within the service, and also demand has been increasing since COVID due to external factors, cost of living crisis, and increased homelessness, as well as the lack of self-service capabilities. That means people have to then call up our customer services department. We've been putting a number of actions in place to try and improve that, and I'm pleased to say that, for the first time in a long time, we've managed to bring that down to 257 seconds below the target, and a lot of hard work has gone in by the team to try and bring that down. Do want to flag that sustaining this will be a challenge because we have peaks and troughs throughout the year. There are certain points in the year where we have a surge in demand due to reasons such as the annual rent letters, the council tax bills, green waste subscriptions go out. So we will have surges in demand throughout the year, and we'll try and manage that as much as we can. But just wanted to flag that sustaining that is a bit of a challenge. I'll just quickly go through some of the actions that we've been putting in place to try and improve that. So as I said, demand is something that we have limited control over within the service itself. What we do have control over is how effectively we manage those calls. So each and every member of staff within CSU have service performance indicators in place where we try and manage the call duration within 300 seconds, and then the wrap up, which is the things that they need to do following on from that call to complete that transaction, of 210 seconds. The team have been putting a lot of focus in trying to drive that down. Pleased to say that over the last few months, we've managed to bring that down to under 300 seconds and the wrap-up time to well below target of under, I think it was 87 seconds. So that's having an impact because the quicker we can get off the phone onto the next person, reduce the call wait times for the next person. We've also been doing a lot of tweaks operationally. The team have been having increased oversight of the dashboard to make sure we can try and flex our skills profile so that actually where we have surging demand in some areas, we can take callers off one area, put them onto the other, so we can have that balanced effect of everybody waiting a similar time. The other thing we've been doing as well is just trying to improve our internal processes. So we've seen in the past where sometimes somebody calls with the front office, we have to refer back to the back office. Sometimes it's difficult to get hold of the relevant person, which obviously creates a delay on the call and then knock-on impact. So we've been creating internal processes much more effectively due to officer processes, so that actually there are those internal mechanisms that we can get hold of the right people at the right time and try and resolve those queries as quick as possible. We have also had more focus on making sure that the rest of the organization understand what's happening in front office, the demand that's coming in. So on a monthly basis, we take an update to our corporate leadership teams, so all of the heads of service and assistant directors, so they recognize what the demand is, what the calls are in relation to what we're seeing in the front, so that then effectively we can discuss, where we're seeing surges in demand, what services are we seeing at that particular moment for whatever reason, and then we can collaboratively come up with ways to try and resolve that or put in place things that ensures that we don't have surges in demand. So whether it's mass communication, stagnating them, making sure two services don't send out communication at the same time so that impacts the call at the front office. Other things we've been doing is callback facilities. So I've talked about this previously. That's been, although the way that our reporting works means that actually it still shows us somebody waiting on the phone as X seconds. The reality is they're not actually waiting, they're in a virtual queue so they can put their phone down, get on with what they wanted to get on with, and then it calls them back when they're in the front of the queue. So we really try to push that, increase that. We've tried to tweak the timings, previously it was up until 2 o'clock, so it ensures people can get called back before 5 o'clock. We've really tried to focus on trying to increase that that facility, and we've seen some success in that. The IVR, the integrated voice recognition, we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes to try and make sure that that works much more effectively, more seamless and more customer friendly. So we've reviewed all of the scripts in collaboration with the other side of my service, the transformation service. We've tweaked all of the scripts so that actually people can get through to the right places much more effectively. And we've really pushed on trying to increase the integration. So where we do have digital capability, we've implemented things like, text, people get a text link where they can just click on and then follow on and complete their transaction. And there's more work to be done on the IVR as I talk about the customer strategy later on. Staffing is a big challenge for customer services. So we have an equivalent turnover rate of 35%. Well, what I mean by equivalent is usually turnover is calculated as the number of people who leave the organization. What we have is a lot of people come into customer services and then move on to other areas within the council. Now, that's really good for the council and good for the individual, but that obviously creates a lot of challenges for our CSU team. So we've been we've tried to be creative in the way we fill some of those vacancies, ensuring where we can try and think about where we have peak demand times and seeing whether we can be flexible in the roles that we offer so that we cover some of the more peak demand times throughout the day. And also we've created a dedicated training officer role, and that allows us to bring people up to speed much more quickly, allows us to broaden the skills profiles of those new people, as well as when there's changes in the back office processes, we can quite quickly make sure the front office staff know about those changes and reflect that in the way that they manage the call. And also in terms of digital capabilities, we're doing a lot of work and we've just kicked off our transformation program to try and increase that digital capability, digital platform that Aidan mentioned earlier, should allow us to really increase the amount that people can do for themselves. So those that want to do for themselves and can do for themselves can essentially do it at the time that's most convenient to them. So Nigel mentioned earlier, we've been working with the Revs and Bends, and we're hoping to launch that in the next month or so. The first process we're going to be launching is giving people the ability to do change of council tax address, and they can just do that themselves much more easily. They won't have to call the front office, back office won't have to deal with it. So we should see a reduction in demand in that specific area. And that's our first process that we'll be doing, and hopefully we'll be rolling that out to many more areas. So that's a kind of a quick synopsis of the action. The paper obviously has much more details, and I'll open up for questions, Chair.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for the report, and thank you for the presentation. Very good. And now we get to test how good a CSU you are by throwing some questions at you. So we'll start with Councillor Guest, and we'll follow on with Councillor Howell and Councillor Adeleke.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a most illuminating report. It's very informative that it states that the customer services representatives are trained in a specific skill set to deal with a specific service. That there's not just generic customer services representatives. They are trained in a specific service. They know about that service. Thank you for writing such an informative report. And then the question comes down to the IVR system. It's been talked about the process of the IVR. Has any work been done on the technical aspects of it, the effectiveness of it? There have been cases of someone spoken clearly into it, and it's heard that the officer or department has been requested as a different one to what the caller has actually requested.
So as part of our review, we put in measures that we can try and monitor that data much more effectively, where it's going through to the wrong department. So we're trying to be on top of that. We've had feedback about that, and sometimes that's out of our control because the technical elements is controlled by the software provider. What we've done is try to make sure that we've got mechanisms in place so we can review that And if we've got a large number of people coming through for the wrong department, we can then relay it back. We've got regular discussions with our software provider. We can then feed that back and say that something's wrong. Can we address that? Why is it picking up the wrong terminology for whatever reason? Sometimes we do get people who will either change their mind midway, or some people obviously know the loopholes and try and bypass it to try and get through to a customer services agent, as you know, without having to go through the different options. So we'll try and manage that and record where we've got people coming to, you know, they said council tax, but they've ended up on a housing queue. We can start to monitor that much more effectively and see why that is.
Thank you.
Councillor Hannell.
Chair, I'd just like to record tremendous amount of thanks to Tracy and her team for a tremendous change around in performance. I remember early summer last year when I asked the question about the fact that the Q1 report was 13 minutes and 8 seconds to get someone to answer a call when they called the council, and my constituents were quite rightly very upset about that. And I said to Sharjah, I thought it was unacceptable, and you were sitting over there and you said we're going to do something about it, and I thought, oh well, you know, I'm a trade unionist, I know what people say. But nevertheless, look at this performance. You've moved from 13 minutes 8 seconds to Q2 10 minutes 11 seconds, and now you're at 4 minutes 17 seconds. Sharjah, you said last time that one of the problems that you had before the new administration came in was dealing with the surge in calls that you had as a result of the green levy payment. Is there anything, the green bin payment, do you anticipate anything in the next few weeks that are going to kind of kick us back over the 5 minute kind of average, or have you got that sorted?
So it is a risk that we've considered, and what we've put in place is temporary additional resources to actually deal with that. So for this year, we have brought in additional resources for a temporary period of time, anticipating that we may have a surge in calls. And as part of our digital platform, one of the first areas that we'll be focusing on this year is trying to make the Greenway subscription digital capability, which hopefully next year will mitigate that even further, because if we can get them to do it much more easily and sign up to an account and recurring payment, for example, actually they don't need to call, they don't need to do anything other than not cancel the subscription, and that will make it even easier. So this year, yes, next year, hopefully even further, try and drive that down.
Chair, I think what Tracy and Sharjah have done, Tracy's team in particular, is definitely the Aston Villa of the Premier League. Certainly, they've
I was so with you until the football reference came out. I was going to suggest that you might think that they're even deserving of their directorate name, and that it's been transformative. Councillor Adeleke.
You recently had new telephone systems.
Not a new telephone system. What we've done is we've reviewed all of our IVR scripts. So what we found was, and I think Councillor Hannell, you know, one of your previous comments around someone waiting very long, we found that actually the IVR scripts hadn't been updated. So I think the background I set in the paper is how the CSU operate as a front of service for services across the council, and historically it was outsourced and then brought back in, and those created some challenges in terms of ownership of scripts and you know, services, whether services are responsible, whether we're responsible. So we've taken the initiative to try and drive that change, you know, and we've gone to services and said we need to change those scripts, make sure they're up to date, we need to make sure that they're directed to the right people. You know, we had instances where, you know, people had changed the numbers and it hadn't been reflected in the IVR, and that was creating a delay in terms of finding a number to call and then coming back through to the CSU. So those are the things. We've taken the initiative to try and drive that change and make it refreshed. And hopefully once we've got the digital capabilities, we want to make it more integrated with back office systems. So actually when somebody calls the IVR and there's an opportunity where the system can take the details and plant it into a system, it's going to be much more effective. That's our aspiration.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chair, I think I came in through the wrong door. I'm coming from the staff side, that your staff, they said they've had problem I think it's going back about 3-4 weeks of now, where when calls come in, they don't have sufficient time before the next call comes in. And I believe it was a new system you introduced.
Entirely sure which system you're referring to. I don't know, Tracy, if you are aware of.
Now, when a call comes in, and by the time they finish making the call and making notes, another call comes in. I think previously they said it could control.
I'm not aware of staff having that issue. I mean, they've got the ability to control that themselves within the system, which is what the wrap-up was. So they're in that
status.
status.
Yeah, I think it's got to do with the wrap-up that it wasn't giving them sufficient time before moving on to the,
So just to explain the process, somebody will call in and the system will hold that call until the caller will hang up the call. And then what we mean by the wrap-up is they may have to send an email to the back office, they may have to complete a transaction, and they've got a target to do that within 210 seconds. And then once they've completed that, they will manually accept the next call. We've been trying to push that so that actually they're more efficient in the way that they deal with the wrap-up. So when you say there's not enough time to answer the next call, there is. What we've been trying to do is improve how they deal with the wrap-up so that actually they can get onto the call much more.
So you've not removed the manual facility? Oh, no. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Duras.
Yes, I'd like to refer my previous question to Tracy, and I acknowledge the answer that she gave a little while ago, so thank you for that. On the question of the staff churn or the turnover of 32%, it's a high number, but I am aware that in call centres it's probably not that exceptional, because call centres by their very nature deal with a huge number of churn and people leaving because it may not be for them. And let's be honest, it can be quite stressful, and we need to recognise that. So it's a high number, but an understandably one. And one final question, and I absolutely don't want to know any names, but is the software provider that you mentioned the same software provider that we've had all the way through with this particular software, or has it changed?
Tracy on that one.
The telephony software?
Yeah,
same.
It's the same. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. It's been a very informative report. Thank you. And congratulations on making such a dramatic improvement in the service. Now, I just want to pick up on what you've got in 2.4 about the calls to housing repairs come to the CSU and are transferred back to Osborne's. Is this a seamless transfer, or do we refer them to another telephone number that they've got to go and call?
So firstly, we to all of our residents and our tenants, we provide them with the number for Osborne's. Unfortunately, some people will still call the council. So when they do call the council, we've got the transfer. We transfer them straight through. So we don't tell them, please go to Osborne's. We'll transfer them straight through. But we do tell them that actually it's Osborne's who deal with the repairs.
Yep. So it is a seamless transfer?
Yes.
Dispatch. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I noticed in the IT report there's an introduction of a new digital platform. Is this digital platform going to be used by the CSU? And is it scaring you, or are you comfortable that it's going to land and not send your call wait times back up?
It's not scaring me. I'm excited about it.
Good.
And the benefits it will provide to our customers and the staff. So I'm just sitting patiently.
I think
waiting for Bonnie's team.
Tracy's been one of the loudest advocates for something new, so I'm not sensing any fear from her.
Sorry, Chair. When's it coming in? When's it?
So it's here. We've purchased it, and because of the nature of it, because it's low code, so we can build and use from elsewhere. We should, well, Saj alluded to it, next month we will start to see the impact of it. So yeah, it's exciting. We're all very excited by it. We think it is the big step for the council to take.
Councillor Stevenson.
Can I just refer back to your comment you were making just now about the green bins? Now that we've into the second year of the green bins, you mentioned that you're looking at the possibility of recurring payments. Can I suggest that we look in fact of going to a direct debit approach to this?
I think that's what I meant by recurring payments is we have to look at, we haven't obviously gone down to the point of designing what that new process will be, but when we do come to the design, we look at what's the most easiest way for the customers. At the heart of our customer strategy and our transformation program is building our processes so that it's easy for the customer. And part of that program will be involving customers as part of our design process. So at that point, we will be able to work out how do they want it designed, how best do they want it, and if it's direct debits, that's what we aim to design it as.
Okay.
Just a quick one from me. I'd just like to thank my team because coming into this and being a new administration, especially for this Lib Dems, I've sat down with the team and we've gone through all the issues that we've had and they've come up with some really good ideas, and I'm so pleased that you're happy. Tracy will get this to sort you out, and I thank the members here who've asked questions and they are happy that the team are doing what you would like them to do. So thank you very, very much, and thank you, team, for your help and Aidan as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll wrap up agenda item 11. Thank you very much, which brings us on to item 12, which is the work programme. Now I'm going to take a sort of stab at feeling of the committee. I think that the two deep dives that we've asked for and got today have been really, really helpful. I think that obviously the level of the report that we've got has been informative, and having time to ask a lot of these questions has helped. So hopefully other people feel the same way, but again, this is a nudge to people that if there are other areas of the service that you'd like to request officers to do a deep dive in a similar way, please reach out to me, and then obviously we'll reach out to officers. I'd selected these two because obviously they're the ones that we've had the most questions and concerns over the last year, and that's why I focus on those two, but there's obviously other ones that other people might want to look at. Do we have any other comments on the work programme, or shall I wrap up? Nope. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.